There is something powerful about a beginning. A beginning does not ask for perfection. It only asks for courage. Today, I want to speak to the part of you that has been told too many times that English is difficult, that it is not for you, that it belongs to someone else. I want you to pause that belief for a moment, because language is not a privilege of a few. It is a bridge, and bridges are meant for everyone who is willing to walk. There is something deeply liberating about realizing that you do not need to begin from perfection. You only need to begin from where you are right now, with everything you already carry inside you, even if that feels small or incomplete. Most people underestimate themselves at the very starting point of learning English because they look at fluent speakers and assume that fluency is the entry ticket, when in reality fluency is just the outcome of repetition, patience, and courage layered over time. You already have something far more valuable than perfect grammar rules or advanced vocabulary. You already have thoughts, emotions, and the ability to express meaning in your own language. And that is the raw material English needs in order to grow inside you. The mistake most beginners make is waiting for readiness, as if one day confidence will arrive like a visitor and suddenly unlock their tongue. But readiness is not something that arrives first. It is something that is built through uncomfortable attempts, through speaking even when your mind feels uncertain, through forming sentences that may not sound correct, but still carry your intention forward. When you start with what you already have, you begin to understand that language is not a wall separating you from others. It is a bridge that you slowly construct word by word, step by step, using the simplest tools available to you. A person does not need thousands of words to begin speaking. They need a few honest ones that they are willing to repeat without shame. Words like I am, I want, I feel, and I need are not just basic structures. They are powerful beginnings that carry your identity into a new form of expression. Many learners feel embarrassed by simplicity, as if simple sentences are a sign of weakness. But simplicity is actually the foundation of mastery. Even the most fluent speakers once depended on the same basic building blocks before they ever reached complexity. And the difference between someone who grows and someone who stops is not talent. It is the willingness to speak before feeling ready. There is also a silent transformation that happens when you stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. Comparison often creates a false belief that others were born with something extra, as if English naturally belongs to them and not to you. But language is not inherited. It is acquired. It enters through repetition, not through privilege. When you accept that your starting point is valid, you stop rushing yourself into frustration and instead allow yourself to grow at a human pace, where mistakes are not signals of failure, but signs of participation in learning. Every time you try to form a sentence, even if it comes out broken or incomplete, your brain is quietly building connections that did not exist before, and those connections are more important than immediate correctness. Starting from what you have also means respecting your current way of thinking instead of trying to erase it. You do not replace your identity when you learn English, you expand it. Your thoughts in your native language are not obstacles. They are bridges that help you map meaning into a new system. At first, you may translate in your mind slowly and awkwardly. But even that process is part of building understanding. Over time, those translations become less conscious, and meaning begins to flow more naturally. This transition does not happen in a single moment of achievement. It happens in repeated attempts that feel ordinary at first, but slowly reshape how you respond to the world. Even hesitation becomes part of learning when you begin from where you are. Hesitation is not a stop sign, it is a pause that shows awareness. It means your mind is working, searching, adjusting. Instead of waiting for hesitation to disappear, you learn to move with it, speaking through it, allowing your voice to exist alongside uncertainty rather than waiting for uncertainty to vanish completely. In those early moments of speaking, even silence before a word has value because it shows you are engaging with something new rather than avoiding it. And this engagement slowly turns unfamiliar patterns into familiar ones that no longer feel heavy or distant. Learning English does not begin in pressure. It begins in environment, and environment is something you can create without needing permission from anyone. Most learners think they must sit with heavy books, strict grammar rules, and long lists of vocabulary to improve. But real learning happens when English becomes part of your daily surroundings, like air that you breathe without forcing it. When you surround yourself with English in a natural way, your mind starts adjusting quietly, without stress, without fear, without the feeling that you are studying something difficult. It starts becoming familiar instead of foreign. And familiarity is the first step toward understanding. You do not need to overload yourself with complex material. In fact, too much pressure slows down learning because the brain begins to associate English with stress instead of communication. Instead, small exposure repeated daily becomes far more powerful. Listening to simple conversations, even if you do not understand every word, slowly trains your ear to recognize patterns. Watching short videos where people speak clearly and slowly helps your mind connect sound with meaning. Reading small captions or short sentences instead of long paragraphs allows you to absorb language without feeling overwhelmed. These small actions may look simple, but simplicity repeated consistently creates transformation. When you expose yourself to English in a gentle way, your brain starts doing something very important. It begins to predict meaning. At first, you may not understand everything, but you will start recognizing repeated words, common phrases, and familiar expressions. This recognition is not instant understanding, but it is the foundation of it. A child learning language does not stop and analyze grammar. The child listens repeatedly until meaning becomes natural. In the same way, your mind learns through exposure before explanation. You do not need to force understanding. You need to allow it to grow through repetition. One of the most powerful ways to surround yourself with English is through listening. Listening is often ignored because people feel they must speak first. But listening builds the inner structure of speech. When you hear English spoken slowly and clearly, your brain starts capturing rhythm, tone, and flow. You begin to understand where sentences rise, where they pause, where emotions are carried. Even if you cannot respond yet, your mind is already practicing silently. This silent practice is often more powerful than forced speaking because it builds confidence from within instead of pressure from outside. Another important part of creating an English environment is removing the idea that every word must be translated immediately. Beginners often stop their learning flow because they try to understand everything at once. But language does not work like a dictionary. Meaning is not always word by word. It is often overall feeling and context. When you allow yourself to listen or read without translating each word, your mind starts thinking in patterns instead of isolated meanings. Slowly, you begin to feel sentences instead of breaking them apart. And that feeling becomes understanding over time. You can also bring English into your personal space without changing your entire routine. Simple actions like changing the language of your phone, reading daily captions on social media in English, or repeating short phrases you hear in videos can quietly train your brain without making you feel like you are studying. Even thinking small thoughts in English during your day, like describing what you are doing or what you see around you, helps your mind adjust to expressing ideas differently. At first, it may feel forced, but repetition turns effort into habit, and habit turns effort into ease. Surrounding yourself with English is not about intensity, it is about consistency. It is not about how much you study in one day, but how often you let English enter your life in small, natural ways. When exposure becomes regular, your brain stops treating English as a subject and starts treating it as a medium of communication. That shift is subtle but powerful because it changes your relationship with the language itself. Instead of feeling like something you must conquer, it becomes something you begin to live with, interact with, and slowly absorb without realizing how deeply it is entering your thinking process. Speaking without fear of mistakes is not just a learning technique. It is a mental liberation. Because the biggest barrier in learning English is rarely vocabulary or grammar. It is the fear of being judged while trying. Many learners already carry sentences inside their minds, but those sentences never reach the tongue because fear interrupts them before they are spoken. Fear creates silence, and silence creates distance between what you know and what you can actually express. The truth is that mistakes are not signs of failure in language learning, they are signs of participation. And participation is the only path toward fluency. When a person begins to speak English, even in its most broken form, something powerful happens in the brain. It starts forming connections between thought and expression that did not exist before. Every incorrect sentence still trains the mind to search for structure, to recognize patterns, to adjust meanings. But when fear takes control, it blocks this process completely. A person may know words, may understand sentences, may even recognize grammar rules, but still remain silent because they are waiting for perfection before expression. Perfection, however, is not the starting point of communication. It is the result of continuous imperfection, repeated without stopping. Mistakes are often seen as embarrassment, especially in environments where correction is harsh or where comparison is common. But in reality, every fluent speaker has gone through a long phase of incorrect sentences, awkward pauses, and confused expressions. The difference between someone who becomes fluent and someone who remains stuck is not the absence of mistakes. It is the absence of fear toward those mistakes. When you stop treating errors as humiliation and start treating them as feedback, your entire learning experience changes. A wrong sentence is no longer a reason to stop speaking. It becomes a reason to try again with better understanding. Speaking without fear also means allowing yourself to be seen in the learning process. Many learners try to hide their struggles by staying silent until they feel fully ready, but readiness never arrives as a perfect moment. It is built through exposure, repetition, and courage to sound imperfect in front of others or even in front of yourself. When you speak English out loud, even alone, even hesitantly, you are training your mind to accept imperfection as part of growth. The tongue becomes more flexible, the mind becomes more responsive, and gradually hesitation begins to lose its power. There is also a silent transformation that happens when you stop overthinking every sentence before speaking. Overthinking creates pressure, and pressure slows down natural expression. Instead of thinking in your native language and then translating every word carefully, you begin to trust simple structures that you already know. At first, sentences may feel short or incomplete, but they carry meaning, and meaning is the core of communication. Fluency is not about long, complex sentences. It is about clear expression that flows without constant interruption from fear. Even self-correction plays an important role in this journey. When you make a mistake and continue speaking, instead of stopping completely, your brain learns resilience. It learns that communication does not end with an error. It continues beyond it. Each time you recover from a mistake while speaking, you strengthen your confidence silently. That confidence is not loud. It does not appear instantly, but it accumulates over time until speaking English no longer feels like a test, but like a natural extension of thought. Fear often disappears slowly, not suddenly. It reduces each time you choose to speak instead of staying silent. It weakens each time you allow yourself to be imperfect without apology. And in that process, something unexpected begins to happen. The voice that was once hesitant starts becoming steady. The thoughts that were once locked inside begin to flow outward. And the language that once felt foreign starts becoming familiar in your own rhythm of expression. 7 days is often underestimated because it feels too small to create anything meaningful, especially something as large as learning a language. But transformation is not always about long timelines. It is about focused intensity. And what a person does with attention inside a short span can reshape how they see themselves. When you commit to 7 days of consistent learning, you are not simply practicing English. You are training your mind to follow discipline, repetition, and courage in a structured way. The real shift does not happen in the language alone. It happens in identity, because each day you choose to continue. You are silently proving to yourself that you are capable of growth, even when comfort is missing. In the beginning, the brain resists change. It prefers familiar patterns, familiar words, and familiar silence. But when you introduce English every day for 7 continuous days, even in small amounts, your brain starts recognizing a pattern of exposure. It begins to expect English at certain moments of your day, and that expectation slowly reduces resistance. On the first day, everything feels unfamiliar and heavy, but by the second and third day, small fragments start to feel recognizable. By the middle of the week, your mind stops reacting with confusion and starts reacting with curiosity. And that shift is more important than immediate fluency. Consistency in these 7 days is not about studying for long hours. It is about returning again and again, even for a short time, without breaking the chain. The power of repetition is often invisible at first, but it builds internal confidence that does not depend on external validation. When you repeat even simple sentences daily, your mouth begins to adjust to new sounds, your ears begin to catch familiar patterns, and your mind starts predicting what comes next in basic conversations. This prediction is the early form of fluency, even though it does not feel like achievement yet. During these 7 days, frustration will appear at some point, because growth often comes with discomfort. There will be moments where you feel like nothing is improving, where sentences still feel broken, where words still do not come quickly. But these moments are not signs of failure. They are signs that your brain is reorganizing itself. Learning a language is not only about adding knowledge, it is about rewiring response patterns. And rewiring always feels slow from the inside, while it is actually happening beneath the surface. What makes 7 days powerful is not perfection, but persistence. Even if you make mistakes every single day, even if your sentences are simple and incomplete, the act of continuing creates momentum. Momentum is what transforms effort into habit, and habit is what turns difficulty into familiarity. By the end of 7 days, you may not be fluent, but you will not be the same person who started. Your relationship with English will shift from fear to familiarity, from hesitation to willingness, from silence to attempt. There is also a quiet change that happens in confidence. At the start, speaking English feels like a performance where every word is judged internally. But as days pass, that internal pressure begins to reduce. You start focusing less on perfection and more on expression. Even small improvements, like forming a slightly clearer sentence or understanding a short video without stopping repeatedly, become signs of progress that build motivation from within. 7 days also teach something deeper than language. They teach trust in yourself. Trust that even if something feels difficult today, repetition can make it easier tomorrow. Trust that small daily effort is not wasted, even when results are not immediately visible. Trust that your voice deserves to be heard, even when it is not fully formed. And through that trust, learning becomes less of a task and more of a personal journey where effort itself becomes meaningful without needing external approval or final validation.